Welcome to Factual America, where we delve into America's most controversial issues with honesty, facts, and a critical approach that cuts through political noise. Today, we're diving straight into the heart of a debate shaping the future of American rights. Inside the Department of Justice's anti-gun playbook. If you care about your liberties, the rule of law, and the power struggles happening in Washington, you're not going to want to miss what we have in store for you. Let's set the stage. The Second Amendment stands as one of the most fiercely defended sections of our Constitution. For many Americans, it's not just about individual ownership, but about the core principles of freedom and self-defense. Yet, behind closed doors, government agencies, led most often by the DOJ, have been steadily advancing policies, directives, and legal maneuverings aimed at tightening gun control across the country. Officials claim it's about safety and public health, but is that really all there is to it? Now, let's pull back the curtain. The Department of Justice, with its immense resources and legal firepower, approaches the gun debate not just as a political argument, but as a mission, and they're playing for keeps. Imagine high-level strategy meetings, memos stamped confidential, and carefully crafted media campaigns, all swirling around a single objective: to re-engineer how America thinks about firearms rights and gun ownership. But what exactly is in this anti-gun playbook? How does the Department of Justice wield its power to shape the nation's views, policies, and, ultimately, laws about your right to bear arms? To see the full picture, we have to break down the legal and public relations moves they use. Let's start with legislative lobbying. Contrary to popular belief, the DOJ doesn't just enforce laws, it helps write them. Deep inside congressional testimony and in private consultations with lawmakers, DOJ officials push for expanded background checks, red flag laws, and other gun control measures. Often, these initiatives are sugar-coated as common-sense reforms. But a closer look at the language reveals provisions ripe for bureaucratic expansion. Then comes the regulatory offensive. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, an arm of the DOJ, wields immense regulatory power. Take, for example, the controversial bump stock ban or the ongoing attempts to redefine pistol braces and receivers, regulatory changes that, without any new law passed, threaten to transform millions of law-abiding gun owners into felons overnight. Here's a twist. While major media outlets love to report that Congress is gridlocked, the ATF's power means entire segments of gun policy can flip on a government memo, not a vote. In some cases, the DOJ drafts guidance that quietly becomes de facto law, enforced with the full power of federal prosecution. This isn't how most Americans think laws should work. Another plank in the playbook is the use of lawsuits in the courts. The DOJ has filed, or weighed in on, key court cases intended to chip away at Second Amendment protections. From backing cities in lawsuits against gun manufacturers, to seeking to defend laws against Supreme Court challenges, the DOJ's legal machinery is always spinning. And often, their legal theories seem designed to create new precedents that make it easier to restrict gun rights in the future. But the playbook doesn't stop with laws and lawsuits. Public messaging is just as important, and the DOJ invests heavily in shifting public opinion. Press conferences are meticulously staged. Leaked memos conveniently find their way to sympathetic journalists. News cycles churn out stories about gun violence epidemics, often citing DOJ studies or hand-picked data, making emotionally charged appeals that drown out broader contexts or declining crime statistics. Let's pause for a moment and consider what happens when entire sectors of the public see only one side of the story, the DOJ's side. Combine the legal muscle with the megaphone, and suddenly, policies once considered extreme find themselves normalized. The Overton window, what's considered acceptable in public discourse, shifts increasingly toward restriction, rarely toward expansion of rights. Here's where things get even more concerning: the weaponization of data collection. The Department of Justice, in coordination with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, is constantly seeking more comprehensive records. Recent pushes for universal background checks aren't just about vetting buyers, they're about building databases. Imagine a future where federal authorities maintain detailed records of every gun purchased, every transfer and every private sale. Is it about safety or tracking law-abiding Americans? But let's dive a little deeper. You might remember Operation Choke Point, a classic example of how the government can use indirect pressure to diminish gun rights. Back in the 2010s, the DOJ worked with regulators to put pressure on banks, making it difficult for firearm businesses to process payments or even open accounts. They didn't pass a law or win a court case. Instead, they simply used their muscle behind the scenes to make being in the gun business a financial liability. Here's a twist that few saw coming. Under the guise of community safety, some DOJ-led initiatives fund local programs that partner with anti-gun nonprofits, sometimes rewarding groups that advocate for the outright repeal of the Second Amendment. Grant programs, research funding, and official partnerships give these advocacy groups both money and a government seal of approval, which they use to press for even stricter laws at the state and local levels. But what about the American people? Has any of this made us safer? The DOJ's playbook often ignores examples where loosening restrictions, like concealed carry, has correlated with drops in violent crime. Instead, the official narrative is carefully steered, citing only outliers or cherry-picked statistics. Even many in law enforcement question some DOJ policies. Behind closed doors, sheriffs and police chiefs in red and blue states alike know that restrictive gun laws do little to stop criminals, who simply ignore them. Instead, the burden falls on everyday Americans, many of whom can't afford to fight lengthy legal battles just to keep their hunting rifle or family heirloom. Let's not forget about how these policies hit hardest in working class and minority communities. History shows gun control measures were once openly used to disarm minorities and the poor. Today's universal rules, enforced by nameless bureaucrats, too often repeat this story under a more polished name. Is this progress, or just the same old power play dressed up in technocratic language? So, what's the real endgame of the DOJ's anti-gun playbook? For the officials who design these policies, it's about control. Control over who can own what and when, and control over the very framework of American liberty. The threat isn't always in the headlines. Often, it's in the small rules, the quiet memos, the forms you never read until it's too late. But Americans are resilient. Gun rights groups, constitutional attorneys, and everyday citizens are increasingly pushing back, suing to overturn bad policy, organizing at the local level, and demanding accountability from those in power. Every time the DOJ makes a move, there's a new wave of activism, innovation in gun safety technology, and court victories that keep the Second Amendment alive. Yet the struggle is ongoing. As we speak, the DOJ continues to test new boundaries, seeing what they can get away with, and what Americans will accept. This isn't a partisan issue. It's about the limits of federal authority and the legacy we leave for future generations. If we're not watchful, the next twist in the playbook could be the one that closes the door on historic freedoms for good. So, where do we go from here? The first step is always awareness. By understanding the DOJ's tactics, we stay vigilant. The next step is engagement. Ask your representatives where they stand. Demand transparency and regulations. Support organizations putting up the legal fight. Most importantly, talk to your friends, neighbors, and family. Inform, debate, and never let this crucial issue fade from sight. At Factual America, we're committed to shining light on the facts no matter how uncomfortable or how fiercely debated. Whether you agree or disagree with gun policies, the conversation about liberty, authority, and the future of our country can't happen in the dark. So, what do you think about the DOJ's anti-gun playbook? Is it reasonable government oversight or a dangerous power grab? Have you seen these policies affect your community? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your story, your perspective, and your solutions. And before you go, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and let us know what other topics you'd like us to uncover in future episodes. Together, we'll keep America informed and free.